Alright, in this video I'm going to show the process of taking a random hard surface asset kind of like this and ZRemeshing it, unwrapping it, and baking out my texture maps. So here I have this plank, and for this plank I'm going to go ahead and go through the ZRemesher workflow. Right now it has some subdivision levels, but I had made it when it was originally just a normal rectangle, so you can see the topology is not quite following the form. So let me go ahead and do this with ZBrush Paint so you can see that better. So it does a little bit, but for the most part it was made without that in mind. And you might even have a version of your model that is dynameshed, right, where the topology really isn't that good. So what I'm going to do is often, especially if I have like a bunch of, let's say I have a bunch of assets, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this one. All right. Let's go ahead and scale it down. This isn't a great example of this, but let's say I was making like a deck or something like that. Let's go ahead and delete higher, delete lower. I'm gonna go ahead and pull this one over. So let's say I have like, some kind of deck with a bunch of wood on it, and pretend these are all slightly different. What I like to do is, I don't like to try to do the ZRemesh workflow when I have like a bunch of subtools and I'm only wanting to work on one of them, just because I think it gets a little too hard to manage. So what I like to do is I like to come up here to the tool palette, and I'm going to go ahead and clone my tool. What that's going to do is it's going to go ahead and create a new tool right here, and it's just going to copy over the currently selected subtool. Right? So I have the subtool right here. I'm going to go ahead and switch that back to basic, just because I like how basic shades. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the asset. I almost always duplicate the asset, one, so I can project the details back from it, and two, also so that I can just have it as a backup in case I screw something up. So for now, I'll go ahead and hide it. I'll come down here to my new one, and we're going to go through ZRemeshing it. So I'm going to come down here to Geometry, ZRemesher, and I'm going to ZRemesh it. And it all depends on your target output, what you're trying to get, and how low you're trying to get. The nice thing about a hard surface asset like this is I don't really care too much about the topology, because it's a hard surface asset, right? So I can go a little bit more janky with it, and also the one thing we probably do have to keep in mind though is poly count or budget. If we're going to be instancing, 500 of these across the scene, this is going to be too high probably. So we got to keep that in mind. I might go a little bit lower, so I'm just going to go ahead, and this is just relative to the size of the object. This target poly count is going to be scaling how many polygons there are. This does not correspond to an actual number that is going to be resulting, but you can see your active poly count usually somewhere up here. So this is down to 2,000, and what it was before was 6,000. Before that it was 170,000. So I'll bring it down. And the thing I'm really trying to look for is I'm trying to see that the major volumes are being represented, mostly in the silhouette, because if you're trying to make this too low poly, so if I went down to something like this, right, the displacement's going to be working really, really hard, and we might end up getting some mesh errors. You can try this, and if you use vector displacement, you could probably go as low as you want down to like a normal rectangle, and you'll be fine. But for the most part, I think something probably closer to this or just slightly lower would be good. All right, and then so once I've gone ahead and ZRemeshed my mesh, I'm going to go ahead and add a few subdivision levels to it, just to get some more resolution back so I can project my details. So I'm just going ahead and dividing my mesh, and this adds subdivision levels, but I still have that lowest subdivision level. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get all the detail back from this mesh onto this mesh. So I'm going to make them both visible. So the eye icon is visible, but I'm going to solo this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on solo. So I'm only viewing the currently active subtool. But there's both still technically visible. And now with both of them visible, with my ZRemesh mesh, I'm going to come down here to project, and I'm going to click on project all. And it's going to go ahead and shrink wrap my model onto anything else that's visible. And that's why we're doing it in this separate tool. If we had those other planks, it would try to project to those other planks too. So this is making sure I'm just going to project it onto its old version of itself. Oop. So I come back here and I'll go up a subdivision level. So I have my subdivision levels pulled up here, but you can just go up a subdivision level here. And we'll click on project all again, go up a subdivision level, project all again, go up a subdivision level, project all again. And the depending on our topology, right? If our topology follows the form really well, or there's those major forms, then we need less subdivisions in order to do the projection and capture all the detail. But you can see right here, let's go up to here. Our original isn't quite as faceted, right? You're starting to see those polygons. So I have to add another subdivision level to this one, and then I'm going to project all. So we're going to click on project all. So the main downside of this is it's not really going to, since we're going to be baking out this map, this high resolution subdivision level, we're going to be like exporting this low res mesh, and this high resolution information is going to be baked out as a map. So for the most part, it's okay if we add more subdivision levels and go up to the millions. The only downside, or the only consideration we have to consider, is how slow your computer is going to be for that projection and the map export. But once it's exported and created, we should be good to go. So now that I've done that whole process, this asset has a low poly version, has all the details on the high poly version from the projection. This original one, I can go ahead and delete that. Say delete, okay. And then what I can do is I can come back to the original subtool with all my other stuff, right? So here's my other planks. I wish I had more examples here. But I'm going to go ahead and insert the ZRemesh version. So we're going to go ahead and pull that from this other subtool into this, from this other tool into this tool with all of our other subtools. So we're going to go ahead and insert. We'll go insert that right there. And so now we have two meshes, right? So we have two of them on top of each other, but we're going to get rid of the old one, right? Because the old one's not needed anymore. Say okay. And now that's the ZRemesher workflow. So that's the basics of just how to do the process of taking a mesh, ZRemeshing it down to get lower topology. And then what we can do is with a low poly asset like this, I don't have to worry too much. Like or with a hard surface asset like this, I'm not going to have to worry too much about, really going really much further with messing around with the topology on this. I could probably take this into Maya and start UV and wrapping, and as long as it's low enough and the displacement looks good, this should be good enough. If we were doing a character or you had a very specific topology you wanted to have in mind, this is going to make it easier to still export out and deal with inside of another program.